The wailing started before the sirens. Branches tore at his arms like claws, his varsity jacket shredded and soaked in blood, though none of it looked like his. Tyler Nash, golden boy of Vire Hollow, ran like hell was chasing him, because it was. He burst out of the tree line, panting and wide-eyed, onto the gravel lot behind Chandler's diner. His sneakers slipped on the wet stones as he screamed for help, but the windows were dark. No one heard. No one came. Neon flickered across his face, pink, blue, then red, not from the diner's sign. From them, he looked over his shoulder. Nothing but trees and shadows and something tall and wrong-shaped melting into the night behind him. Tyler stumbled onto the road, waving down the one car he saw, a rust-bitten Buick idling at a red light with two teens in the front, music thumping loud. He slammed his hands on the hood. "Help me!" The couple screamed. They saw it behind him. Something rising out of the mist, gliding more than walking, its face stretched and hollow, like the skin of a mannequin painted with blood. Its hands didn't touch the ground, its teeth didn't look like teeth. Then, the streetlight exploded. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, all they found was Tyler's Letterman jacket tangled in a tree branch. It was still warm. Vire Hollow pretended nothing happened. By noon the next day, the diner was serving pumpkin pie and grilled cheese. Mrs. Lint's poodle show went on as scheduled. Nobody mentioned Tyler, not once. Even his own mother blinked blankly when Raven asked. Like he'd never existed, but he had. Raven had the blood sample, the security footage, the smear of something black and unnatural on the Buick's windshield, staining the glass like rot. Detective Raven Mallory stood outside the high school stadium that night, watching the floodlights flicker. The air smelled like rust, like burnt oil and something sweeter underneath, saccharine, like rotting fruit in the sun. This wasn't the first. 3 missing this month, all young, all last seen after midnight, all in that narrow window between the dead of night and the world waking up. And every time, the whispers started up again about that club. Tourniquet. No address, no website, no signs, only open from midnight to 4 a.m. Raven lit a cigarette with fingers that didn't shake. She'd seen things, worse things. A case in Detroit that never made the papers, a subway tunnel in D.C. that was sealed in concrete, a morgue that hummed. But Vire Hollow, this was different. People here forgot things they shouldn't. They smiled too easily, and no one ever heard the music unless it was already too late. She stared up at the empty sky above the stadium, where something dark moved between clouds like a ripple through water. The hairs on her arms rose. In the distance, under the hum of the halogen lights, she could almost hear it. The low throb of bass. Calling. The flyer wasn't printed, it was birthed. It appeared on Raven's windshield just after midnight. No footprints in the snow, no trace of who left it. The paper felt strange in her hand, like it had been soaked in oil and left to dry under moonlight. A crimson rose bled across the background with thin silver lettering pressed like veins. Tourniquet. Tonight, 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., only the chosen will hear the beat. Raven flipped it over. Nothing, no address, no instructions. And yet, somewhere beneath her ribs, she felt something pull. A tiny, unfamiliar rhythm. Faint, like a second heartbeat. She crushed the flyer and shoved it in her coat. The station was too quiet. Her office light buzzed with a flicker that no one could fix. The coffee tasted like chemicals, and her captain, a soft-eyed man named Greeley, had already stopped asking questions about the missing. He said there were no missing persons cases. He said Tyler Nash never existed. I met him, Raven told him, her voice flat. He was in my file yesterday. Now it's gone. You've been working a lot of late nights, Greeley replied, smiling the same unnatural smile the others wore. Maybe you just need rest. Raven didn't blink. You ever heard of a place called Tourniquet? He paused. Just a flicker, a shadow across his eyes. Then he laughed. What? Like a band? No, a nightclub. Oh, he said slowly. I don't think we have anything like that in Vire Hollow. We're not exactly the party type. But his fingers twitched against the desk, tapping in a rhythm. Thump, tap, 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 thump. The beat echoed in her head again, deeper this time, closer. Outside, the sky hung low and bruised, the kind of night that pressed against the skin like a wet cloth. Raven walked the town alone. She noticed things now, off things. Old men muttering as they stared into dark windows. A girl crying in an alley with her earbuds in, dancing slowly with no music. A shadow that seemed to stretch against the direction of light. She found an old record store at the edge of town. A peeling sign above the door read, Moonspin Vinyl. Inside, dust blanketed the rows of forgotten albums like ash. And behind the counter sat a man with gauze over his ears and eyes stained black at the corners. I'm looking for information, she said. He didn't respond. Raven pulled out the flyer. About Tourniquet. His fingers trembled. Then slowly, he slid a cracked cassette tape across the counter. No label, no writing, just a sticker with a red rose. She stared at it. What's on this? His voice came out cracked like a broken speaker. A beat that bends you. That night, Raven played the tape, alone, lights off, gun in her lap. It started as static, then distant bass, then laughter. Soft at first, then louder, then screaming layered beneath the synth. She paused it, her heart thundered, but her foot kept tapping. Thump, tap, 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 thump. She wasn't even aware of it, not until the tape ejected itself and the lights flickered. And from the window, a face. Too pale, too symmetrical, eyes like empty black vinyl, watching her from across the street, unmoving in the snow, smiling. Then gone. The next morning, the flyer was missing, so was the tape. Her cassette player was melted from the inside, and her voicemail had been wiped. All that remained was a new flyer tucked under her pillow. You're almost ready. Come find us, Raven. 1986, 1:03 a.m. The church bells had stopped ringing, but Raven could still feel them in her chest. Each phantom toll echoed like a warning stitched under her ribs. She stood at the iron gates of St. Maro's, flashlight cutting through fog so thick it swirled like breath. Behind her, the ancient chapel loomed with its boarded-up stained glass and slanted steeple, abandoned for nearly a decade. But someone had lit a candle inside. She saw the flicker just as she turned away. She almost went back. Almost. A crunch in the distance yanked her attention away. Gravel, hurried footsteps, and then nothing. Just the wind, curling through the alley beside the chapel like it was whispering her name. Raven. She froze. No one was there. No one should be there. Still, she walked toward it, pulse steady, hand on the grip of her service weapon. She followed the alley around the back of the church, where rusted playground swings moaned in the breeze and an old tricycle lay tipped over in the dirt. Red plastic faded to pink. Then she saw it, a spiral. Drawn in chalk across the crumbling brick wall. Fresh, smudged, still wet from dew. Beneath it, 12 a.m., Tourniquet, bring the gift. Raven took a slow step back. Her boot cracked over something. She looked down, a cassette tape, no case, no label, just that same spiral, burned in, not drawn. She left it, didn't pick it up, didn't need to. Her stomach had already turned cold. She radioed in the symbol and kept moving, heading toward the school just 3 blocks away. A creeping instinct pulled at her spine, the way the fog followed her, the way the silence bent around her footsteps like the town itself was holding its breath. The church disappeared behind her, and Vire Hollow High rose in the dark like a mausoleum, its windows black, its rooftop clock frozen at 12 o'clock. Raven's patrol wasn't over, it was just beginning. Vire Hollow High rose is. She pushed through the side gate. It creaked with a hollow groan, the kind that echoed too long in the silence. The concrete path to the school's west entrance was littered with leaves, wrappers, and a single scuffed high heel. She paused. The shoe was fresh, no dust, no dew. It hadn't been there yesterday. Her flashlight cut across the parking lot. Empty, but only visually. Something hung in the air here, thick, like wet velvet, like breath you didn't take. Raven adjusted her grip on the maglite and stepped closer to the rear doors. One of them was slightly ajar. Unlocked, the hairs on her arms stood up. She tapped her radio. Unit 5 checking rear entry at Hollow High. Door unsecured, no sign of forced entry. Static, then a soft pop of feedback. No response. She eased the door open with the edge of her boot. It yawned inward with a soft click. The scent inside hit her first. Mildew, wax, something sweeter underneath. Almost floral, almost rotten. The hallway was dark, save for the red glow of the exit sign behind her. Her flashlight landed on the trophy case near the main office. Every single photo inside, every face, had been scratched out, deeply, violently, even the glass bore grooves. She kept walking. The clack of her boots was swallowed too quickly, as if the school didn't like noise anymore. Rows of lockers loomed on either side, silent sentinels under flickering ceiling lights. And then she heard it. Music. Distant, slow, warped. It was leaking from somewhere upstairs, an instrumental melody twisted by age, like a prom song warped on a melted cassette. She followed it. Up the stairwell, past water-stained murals and a black smear on the wall that hadn't been there before. Her breathing stayed level, but her fingers twitched near her holster. Second floor, the music got clearer. She turned the corner and saw footprints, bare, wet, leading down the hallway. They shimmered with something iridescent in her light. She followed, past the nurse's office, past the counselor's door swinging open on rusty hinges, past a classroom with chairs overturned, as if the students had fled mid-lesson. The footprints ended at room 237. The music was loud now, right behind the door, and under it, bleeding out into the hallway, red light, pulsing. She touched the knob. It was warm, alive. Later that night, Raven followed the beat again. It throbbed beneath her thoughts, guiding her through back alleys and frostbitten streets, past the dead rail yard and the frozen junkyard where dogs refused to bark. Then she saw them, the dancers. 6 teenagers, silent, barefoot, eyes shut, swaying in a perfect slow-motion circle under a flickering streetlight. No music, no phones, no laughter, just motion, fluid and wrong. Their heads turned too far, spines arched back like puppets held by invisible strings. One of them opened her mouth. From it came a distorted, screeching synth, like a vinyl skipping on a scream. Blood trickled from her ears as she twirled. Raven stepped forward, Then they all stopped, mid-motion. Every head slowly turned to face her at once. Then, in unison, "You can't stop the song." They scattered like shadows doused in gasoline. Back at her apartment, Raven barely made it inside before the lights flickered again. Her television turned on by itself, static, then flicker, then a video she didn't own, surveillance footage. From inside Tourniquet, a faceless crowd danced, their bodies bending in impossible shapes as red strobes pulsed. Then, in a strobe freeze frame, she saw herself in the center of the dance floor. Eyes black, lips red, smiling, then darkness. The next day, Jules Beck vanished. He was the only reporter still investigating the disappearances, the last friend Raven trusted. They'd spoken the night before. He said he was going to find Tourniquet. All that was found of him was a note in his own handwriting. "I danced. I remember everything, but it's too late." That afternoon, Raven walked past the post office. A man waved at her from across the street. He looked exactly like Jules, same height, same smile, same jacket, but his eyes were too perfect, his skin too smooth. And when she blinked, he was gone. That night, she finally heard the music full-blown, pounding, evolving, like flesh scraping against vinyl. It wasn't coming from a speaker. It came from underneath the town, through the pavement, the drains, the blood vessels of Vire Hollow itself. She stood at the edge of the old train tunnel, the iron archway bent as if it had breathed, her breath frosted in front of her, but the air smelled like perfume and rot. Something moved in the tunnel, tall, bone pale, wearing a rose-pink suit, seams bulging from the thing beneath. It lifted a pale hand and pointed at her. Its voice was impossibly soft, velvet and corroded. "You're offbeat, Raven, but not for long." The old DJ's name was Preacher Ricks. No one called him that anymore, not since the fire. Now he lived behind a boarded-up laundromat on the edge of town, under flickering red bulbs that never seemed to burn out. His face was a melted mess of scars and silver piercings, his eyes stitched with mirrored glass. He hadn't spoken aloud in years. But he'd seen Tourniquet and survived, kind of. Raven found him in the basement. The air was thick with melted vinyl and incense. Broken radios crackled with whispers. On the walls, dozens of speakers, all unplugged, all humming something just outside the range of human hearing. She showed him the spiral symbol. He rasped. Then he started tapping his fingers. Sharp, frantic. Raven handed him a notepad. He wrote in jagged scrawl, "It's not a club. It's a net. The beat is alive. You dance to it long enough. It takes root in you. You don't leave Tourniquet. You change. You become part of the set." Raven leaned in. "What are they?" Preacher's smile tore crooked across his scars. Then he turned and pointed to the wall, a massive painting behind a torn sheet, a crowd of dancers with no faces. Above them, a figure on a throne of speakers, 7 limbs, no eyes, its mouth wide and infinite. The words beneath it burned into the wall. "The maestro of veins." Then Preacher handed her one last thing, a cassette tape marked with dried blood and rose thorns. On it, scribbled in ink, her voice, "Don't listen unless you're ready." Before she could ask what that meant, the radio screamed. Preacher shoved her toward the exit, and Raven ran. Behind her, the sound of a heartbeat pounded through the walls, fast, warped, and wrong, then silence. When she looked back, the basement was gone. Outside, the town had changed again. Balloons floated from power lines, wilted roses scattered the sidewalks, flyers littered every telephone pole. Tourniquet tonight. Final set, 12 a.m. Dress code. Skin. Every face she passed looked too smooth, too still. Some smiled too long, some blinked out of sync. One woman was humming, with no mouth. That night, Raven went home and locked every door, but the beat still found her. It wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was coming from beneath her skin. She played the tape. At first, just wind, then a woman's voice, whispered, familiar. Raven, you're so close to remembering. Then, the sound of a child's laughter, then crying, then screeching, like metal dragged down a chalkboard dipped in blood. Raven fell to her knees, clutching her head. Then she saw it. A flashback, not memory, something implanted. A ritual, a small, smoky room, her mother holding a rose, her father dancing with something wearing his face, but not his eyes. A cult. The club wasn't just feeding, it was growing, slowly, for decades, beneath Vire Hollow. And Raven had once been inside. She just didn't remember, until now. She blacked out. When she awoke, her front door was open. Inside her house, rose petals, a flyer on her mirror, written in blood. You danced once. It's time to finish the song. 1986. The world outside was all perms, power chords, and neon Coke fizz, but Vire Hollow pulsed to a different beat, a deeper one, the kind that didn't stop when the music did. It was 11:57 p.m. when Raven stepped out of her Camaro and into the back lot behind the crumbling movie theater, just where Preacher Ricks had scribbled the X. The fog clung to her boots like living things. The cassette, her voice was still clutched in her hand, her last anchor to sanity. And then a door appeared. It hadn't been there a second ago. A metal door in the brick wall, glowing faint red beneath a flickering exit sign. Bass thudded behind it, not heard but felt. Like it came from the marrow. Raven touched the handle, cold, wet, like it had just been pulled from a grave. She opened it. Inside, chaos disguised as glamour. Tourniquet wasn't built, it was grown. Black walls pulsed like muscle. The lights flickered in slow-motion strobe, and the floor looked like polished bone under swirling fog. Everything smelled like sweat, blood, roses, and ozone. The dancers were beautiful, too beautiful, smooth-skinned, glittering, eyes like wax marbles, mouths that moved but didn't match the music, bodies bent in rhythms that didn't belong to bones. They moved around her like she wasn't there, and above them, on a balcony, lit in ultraviolet. Him. The one in the rose-pink suit, the man she saw in the tunnel. But now she saw what he was. Not just pale, not just inhuman, a hybrid, vampire, shapeshifter, glamour fiend. His body flickered between forms, bone, smoke, velvet, void. The maestro of veins, and next to him, sipping from a champagne glass filled with red, Captain Greeley. He saw her, he smiled, and whispered something into the maestro's ear. She moved deeper into the club. Rooms opened and twisted. No layout made sense. It was a maze built by music. She passed dancers with no faces, a man melting into the wall, smiling, a child floating above the dance floor like a balloon with red-stained feet. She passed a mirror and saw herself, but not herself. Eyes black, lips red, dancing like she was born to it. The reflection smiled. We missed you. In the heart of Tourniquet sat the DJ booth, and it wasn't a booth. It was a throne made from old bones, wires, speakers, and hooked into it was Jules. or what was left of him. His skin was stretched with wires, his mouth sewn open. The music came from inside him. He looked at Raven. One tear slid down his cheek. He mouthed, "Run." But it was too late. The music dropped. The floor vanished beneath her, and she was in the core. The final set wasn't a dance floor. It was a ritual, a pit of writhing shadows and bodies and blood, and standing in the center, arms outstretched, was the maestro, and beside him, her mother. Alive, unaged, drenched in silk and red. "You were born here, Raven," she whispered. "You were meant to bring the song full circle." Raven shook. "You're dead. You died when I never left. I changed. And you will too." Then the maestro stepped forward. "Your blood sings louder than the rest. It remembers, and it's time." The lights died. The music crashed into chaos, and Raven danced. For 1 second, for one song, and the moment her feet moved, the club breathed. The crowd cheered in unison, then screamed. Raven dropped to her knees, something inside her twisting, shifting, her hands blurred, her veins lit. But then she reached into her coat. The cassette. She shoved it into the throne deck. Her voice played. Not music, not song. Screaming, pure, ancient, impossible screaming. The maestro howled. The crowd convulsed. Mirrors shattered across the club. The ceiling cracked, the spell broke, and Raven ran through blood, shadow, smoke until the door slammed behind her. And just like that, Tourniquet was gone. The town was silent the next day. Flyers burned in the streets, names reappeared on rosters. The beat was gone. But so was Captain Greeley, so was the mayor, so were a dozen others who'd smiled too long. And Raven? She stood at the edge of the train tunnel, breathing, alive, but something behind her eyes pulsed, a rhythm. Thump, tap, 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 thump. She didn't sleep that night, she just danced, alone, in the dark. 3 weeks later. Raven sat alone in her Camaro, parked at the edge of a lonely gas station just past the Vire Hollow city limit. The world outside looked normal. Radio static, flickering fluorescence, a bored clerk inside reading a tabloid. But the cassette was back. It sat on her passenger seat like it had always been there. No label, no blood, just humming, soft, low, tempting. She hadn't played it. Not yet. Her fingers twitched. In the rearview mirror, she caught her reflection. For a split second, her eyes weren't hers. They were pitch black, dancing, grinning. She blinked, gone. She reached for the tape. Her hand shook. A motorcycle roared past on the highway. Its rider wore headphones, bobbing his head to something silent, taped to the back of his leather jacket. A copy of the same cassette, the symbol spray-painted on his helmet. The spiral. Inside the gas station, the clerk turned up the old radio. The static cleared, then music, a beat, familiar, deep, too slow, too smooth. Synths twisting like veins through a disco scream. A voice whispered between the bass lines. "Welcome back to the set. It never really ended." Raven popped the cassette into the deck. It clicked. The music started, and this time, she didn't turn it off. The end. For now.